So I'd like to talk now just a little bit about the hardened software that we discussed a few slides back and what GitLab is doing there. Now, the Air Force in particular has been very, very aggressive in standing up what are called software factories. They decided to break the traditional model of being on base, being in restricted areas. They're standing up these software factories in various areas, in shared office suites, if you will, and they're being used to address various aspects of the Air Force software needs. Bespin is doing a lot of mobile development, and there's different camps that are addressing the different airframes, such as F-16, F-18s, U-2s, etc. And in fact, it's not only the Air Force, the Navy is moving very aggressively into this world with initiatives like Compile to Combat in 24-hour, where when we realize there's a change needed, we can make the change, make sure it's secure, and deploy that change out to the endpoint as quickly as possible. The reason for all this is because of the threat landscape today being so aggressive. Threats are coming in at a far more rapid pace than they ever have, and we need to be able to address those vulnerabilities and those threats as quickly as possible. So this is just a depiction of what the Air Force's software factory status looks like. Again, there are the software factories all through the country and being used to address, as you see depicted here, a lot of different aspects of the Air Force in the DoD. Now, this slide is really just depicting that in the Air Force, they recognized they needed to address three things to make this work. To make it DevSecOps as efficient as possible, they needed to have software that's accessible by all the Air Force departments. They needed to have a place to run it, and they needed to have a way of procuring it. Software being the licenses, services, etc. So as far as where to run the software, the Air Force has stood up something called Platform One and Cloud One. Platform One takes advantage of providing all of hardened approved software tools, as of this writing, about 172, out to any Air Force entity that wants to use it. And they've got the processes in place to make sure that those software modules or packages are all configured the way you would want them to be. And then Cloud One really just provides cloud infrastructure to anyone in the Air Force. So if you want to kind of roll your own, if you will, can certainly do that. Now, as far as the software itself being hardened, up in the top right, you see Repo One and Iron Bank. Iron Bank used to be called DCAR, DoD Centralized Artifact Repository. What happens is vendors like GitLab submit on the left side under public software repositories. We submit our software to this GitLab repository. That kicks off some pipelines, like we talked about earlier, that runs all types of security scans on them. And if that if that software product passes, it moves into Iron Bank, where it sits in there and can be accessed by anyone wanting to use, for instance, GitLab's hardened, approved container software in their environment. So like we said, there's about 174 that's constantly growing as of this writing. Software that is hardened. Now, keep in mind, Iron Bank is not just for Air Force. Anyone, commercial or anywhere else, can obtain software out of Iron Bank, download it, and use it. I do want to point out at this point that GitLab in particular, it's the exact same software that's available on our regular distribution channels. It's just that all of our software has been secured and vulnerability remediation has been done to meet these DoD level requirements. So we do not want two different code streams. Of course, we want to always offer the most secure software to everyone using GitLab. And then lastly, to the bottom, you see these basic ordering agreements, and we're not going to spend too much time on that, but that's how the DoD has enabled of people to procure the licenses and services around these hardened containers. So the point being, you could say, hey, I want to use the GitLab hardened container. I want to run it in Platform One, and I'm going to go and procure the licenses for it. And these BOAs allow you to procure those licenses in days rather than weeks or hours. So there's a lot of other information out there. You can scan these codes or click on the links, and go ahead and obtain the documentation around this. They do a number of AMAs in the Air Force in particular, so you can go out and listen in on what's going on in Cloud One or Platform One, et cetera.